Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I do hope all of you who watch this video are always happy and healthy. So today I'm going to present my PowerPoint which is about analysis novel. And I do this part to finish my final test from my supporting lecturer, Miss Fajriani. But before that, let me introduce myself. I'm Mardewi from Class A English Education of Sulawesi Barat University, batch 2022. So, let's get started. Here are our topics that we are going to discuss together. The first one is the novel. The second one is biography of the writer. The third one is history of writer's personal life. The fourth one is the other literary works of the writer. The fifth one is the synopsis of the story. The sixth one is the similarities to personal life of the writer with his literary works and the differences. The seventh one is analysis characters. The eighth one is analysis story. And the last is the messages of the story. Let's explain that completely. The first one is the novel. Today's novel that I'm going to discuss is Hard Times, 1854, that is created by Charles Dickens in the English literature period or in the Victorian era. Next, we move to the next slide. It is about the biography of writer. Yep, it is Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, 1812 to 1870, was an English novelist, social critic, and philanthropist who is widely regarded as one of the greatest writers of the Victorian era. He was born on February 7, 1812 in Portsmouth, England, and was the second of 8 children. His father, John Dickens, was a naval clerk who struggled with debt, and Charles was forced to leave school at the age of 12 to work in a factory pasting labels on coats of wood blacking. Dickens' experiences working in the factory and his father's imprisonment for debt greatly influenced his later writing, and he often wrote about poverty and social injustice. His first published work, Sketches by Boz, was a collection of humorous and satirical pieces about life in London, which was published in 1836. In 1837, Dickens' novel The Pickwick Papers was published in serial form, and it became an instant sensation, making him a literary celebrity. Over the next 2 decades, he wrote a series of novels that are now considered classics, including Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, Bleak House, Great Expectations, and A Tale of Two Cities. In addition to his writing, Dickens was a social reformer and philanthropist, and he was involved in a number of charitable organizations. He also edited and wrote for the journal Household Words, which focused on social issues and reform. Dickens' personal life was often tumultuous. He had 10 children with his wife, Catherine, but their marriage was unhappy, and they separated in 1858. He also had a number of extramarital affairs. Dickens died on June 9, 1870, and at the age of 58. After suffering a stroke, he was buried in Poets' Garden in Westminster Abbey, and his novels continue to be widely read and celebrated today. Next, the third topic, it is about history of writer's personal life. Yes, it is Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was a famous 19th century English novelist and social critic. He was born on February 7, 1812, in Portsmouth, England, and died on June 9, 1870 in Kent, England. Dickens had a colorful and often tumultuous personal life. Dickens married with Catherine Hogarth in 1836, and the couple had 10 children together. However, their marriage was not a happy one, and they separated in 1858. Dickens' affair with actress Ellen Ternan is believed to have contributed to the breakdown of his marriage. He continued to support Catherine financially, but he never lived with her again. In addition to his marital difficulties, Dickens had a strained relationship with his parents. His father was sent to debtor's prison when Dickens was a child, and this experience had a profound impact on him. Dickens later wrote about his difficult childhood in his novels, such as Oliver Twist and David Copperfield. Despite these personal challenges, Dickens was a prolific and successful writer. He wrote many of his most famous works, including A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations during the 1850s and 1860s. He was also an active philanthropist and he worked to improve the life of poor and disadvantaged in Victorian England. Dickens' personal life was full of ups and downs, but his contributions to English literature and his advocacy for social justice have made him a beloved and enduring figure in history. Next, the fourth one is the other literary works of the writer. As we know together that Charles Dickens was a prolific writer and is considered one of the most significant literary figures of the Victorian era. Here are some of his literary works. The first one, Oliver Twist. The second one is Nicholas Nickleby. The third is The Old Curiosity Shop. The fourth is David Copperfield. The fifth is Bleak House. The sixth is Hard Times. The seventh is A Tale of Two Cities. The eighth one is Great Expectation. The ninth is Our Mutual Friend. And the last is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Let's move to the next slide. It is about the synopsis of the novel. Because the synopsis in this slide is too long, I'll make it shorter. Hard Times by Charles Dickens is the story of a group of people living in an industrial town called Chucktown in the mid-19th century. Thomas Gradgrind, the key character in the story, is an academic supervisor in the community who believes in facts and all work without messing around. At the beginning of the story, he is shown quizzing his students on facts and calling them by their assigned numbers rather than by name. Loisa and Tom become interested in the circus and are seen watching the circus in town. Mardewi often led people in the town to believe that she was an independent person and grew up poor, but her story was ultimately false as her real mother was later revealed. Stephen Blackpool lives in a poor area of the city and wants a divorce from his alcoholic wife. Blackpool is also in love with Russell, who works with him in the factory. Mr. Mardewi insists to Black that only the rich can afford a divorce, so he must accept his life circumstances and remain unhappy married. When Blackpool returns home that day, he sees Russell caring for his ailing wife. Russell even stopped Blackpool's wife from swallowing a deadly drug, making him love Russell even more. Next, in this slide, we talk about the similarities and the differences of Charles Dickens' personal life with his work Hard Times. So, what are the similarities of his? Okay, the first one is Dickens' own experiences with poverty and hardship are reflected in a book's depiction of the working class struggle. The second one is both Dickens and his protagonist Thomas Gradgrind were proponents of education, but they both saw the limitation of a purely utilitarian approach to education. The third one is both Dickens and the characters in Hard Times are concerned with issues of social justice and inequality. What about the differences? The first one is while Dickens' personal life was marked by financial struggles, he eventually achieved great success as a writer and became wealthy. In contrast, the characters in Hard Times are largely trapped in their social and economic circumstances and struggle to improve their situations. The The second one is Dickens had a tumultuous personal life, including a difficult marriage and numerous affairs, while the characters in Hard Times largely lack emotional depth and complexity. And the last is Hard Times is a work of fiction, while Dickens' personal life was real. Although the book draws on Dickens' own experiences and beliefs, it's not a direct reflection of his life or memoir. We move to the analysis characters. These are actually my personal opinion about the characters. And let's see together that I already put my opinion in this slide. But before going to my opinion, here are some of the main characters of Hard Times by Charles Dickens. There are Thomas Gradgrind, Mr. Josiah Mardewi, Louisa Gradgrind, Tom Gradgrind, Sissy, Stephen Redpool, Rachel, James Harthouse, and Mrs. Parson. So let's go to my opinion. Based on the description of the character, I can give my opinion that the novel Hard Times is a novel created by Charles Dickens for his form of criticism of businessmen who are only concerned with themselves and torment ordinary people and without any sense of empathy towards society at all. Based on the characters in the novel Hard Times, it is very appropriate and able to satirize the rulers who have no humanity at all. And in these characters, there are good people like Russell, in her character as a good, honest working woman where she works, and Sissy as a student in the Great Grand community. The characters played in the novel Hard Times, in my personal opinion, were able to make me immediately touched and understood from the story conveyed. And unfortunately, at the end of the story, some of the characters are trapped in social and economic circumstances, and almost all the characters in the character experience a tragic life except Sissy. In this case, there should be a character who is able to change these conditions so that there is an end to the story that makes the reader happy, and that is a form of solution to the form of criticism given by Charles Dickens. Next, we talk about analysis story. These are actually my personal opinion as well, but I don't forget to look for some information about the story and connect it each other. Let's see together. Based on the novel entitled Hard Times, I can conclude that the novel was created as a form of Charles Dickens' criticism of life in the Victorian era, where the story is set in Choptown, which is an industrial town whose characters focus on their own interest without seeing the suffering of the community due to their actions. There are several conflicts told in the novel as evidence of Charles Dickens' criticism of the shortcomings of Victorian society. The first one is social and cultural conflicts point of view. There are class disparity, industrialization and utilitarianism, and gender roles. The second one is the psychological conflict point of view. There are emotional suppression, and effects of utilitarian education. And the last is about moral and ethical conflicts point of view. There are exploitation and dehumanization, and the last, the importance of compassion and empathy. Now we are on the top of our topic today, or we can say we are in the last slide. It is about the messages that we can get from the novel Hard Times by Charles Dickens. Here are some key messages about Hard Times in the works of Charles Dickens that I can get. The first one is the importance of empathy, compassion, and love for those who suffer and trying to understand the struggle. Meanwhile, the story depicts forced labor with disproportionate wages and the characters of Mr. Gradgrind, who values facts and figures over human emotion. The second one is in the story Hard Times, which uses the power of industrialization as a platform to torment the people and have a negative impact on the environment. From this, we learn that being someone who takes care of industrial and factory matters is fair and selfless and is able to provide a decent life for workers without treating them arbitrarily and not forgetting that the environment and industry must be balanced. And the last is the importance of education described in the novel Hard Times, because with this education that will gradually provide changes, strength of principle, and an attitude of resistance to harmful industrialization. So, I think that's all for this video presentation. I'm sorry if there are mistakes, and thank you so much for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.